Spring is in the air, which means now is the time to save during spring outdoor power deals at the Home Depot. Make cleanup easier when you go cordless with the Milwaukee M18 string trimmer, designed to deliver more runtime, more speed, and maximum performance. Then grab a select Milwaukee fuel attachment, like the pole saw, edger, or brush cutter, included at no extra cost when you buy the Milwaukee M18 string trimmer. Shop 7 days of spring outdoor power deals at the Home Depot, now through April 29th.
Kayak gets my flight, hotel, and rental car right, so I can tune out travel advice that's just plain wrong.
Bro, Skycoin. Way better than points.
Never fly during a Scorpio full moon.
Just tell the manager you'll sue. Instant room upgrade.
Stop taking bad travel advice. Start comparing hundreds of sites with Kayak and get your trip right.
Bad advice? You talking to me?
Kayak. Got that right.
I hope that it meets people where they are. I know we come to this work from all different places, and I wanted to write it in a way where you could pick it up anywhere you are and fall into it, feel supported throughout the entire journey, understand that there's a scope and sequence to healing. You don't just, it's not overnight. There is a process. You will grow the skills and the ability to the same way the human body does as we grow. The day you tie your shoes is not what it looks like when you're 18. Like it's the first time, it's a fumble, and that's okay. And to have that acceptance and knowledge that hope is there, that it's possible to heal. When I started, the thinking was kind of like once you were broken, you were always broken, and you just always be scarred. And I didn't accept that for myself.
Welcome to the A World of Difference podcast. I'm Lori Adams Brown, and this is a podcast for those who are different and want to make a difference.
Hi, it's Lori Adams Brown, and welcome back to A World of Difference, the podcast where we talk about what it really takes to lead, to heal, and to show up as yourself in a world that often asks you to be somebody else. Today's guest is someone you've been asking about since her last visit, and she's back with a new book that I believe is going to change lives. Her memoir, A Well-Trained Wife, which she was on the show before talking about, became a New York Times bestseller. No shock to me. It's such a good book. And now she's written what I can only describe as a roadmap for the people who needed that book the most, including me. Stay with us. Are you on Substack? Because I am, and I'd love to connect with you there. I process things there over Saturdays and Sundays, days off, sometimes weeknights as I'm researching and reading other articles, and it inspires me to write things where I'm going deeper into the behind the scenes of what some of the episodes on A World of Difference are all about. I'd love to connect with you there. So if you are on Substack, find me. You can go to loriadamsbrown.substack.com as a free, or I would prefer a paid subscriber, because then you get access to more of the in-depth things that are exclusively for my paid subscribers. I keep my prices as low as they can be on Substack, as low as they allow. But I do believe in being paid for my work, and I believe you should be paid for yours too. So join me there and let's make a difference together. My guest today is Tia Levings, New York Times bestselling author, speaker, and one of the most clear-eyed voices writing about religious trauma, evangelical patriarchy, and the long road back to yourself. Her new book is I Belong to Me, A Survivor's Guide to Recovery and Hope After Religious Trauma. Her work has appeared in Teen Vogue, Salon, Newsweek, and the Huffington Post. She appeared in the hit Amazon docuseries Shiny Happy People, and she is based in Raleigh, North Carolina. She's a mom of 4 incredible adults, and you can find her everywhere at Tia Levings Writer. Tia, welcome back to A World of Difference. Tia Levings, welcome back to A World of Difference.
Thank you so much. Looking forward to this.
Me too. And thank you so much for an advance copy of your book that's about to be released, I Belong to Me. What a title. What a book. You have written something just so incredible again. You're such a good writer and a deep thinker. And I just found it to be such a gift to me. I know it's going to be a gift to everybody who reads it. It's a very visceral experience, at least it was for me, in the very best way. It caused me to think more deeply. I found myself looking up sites, and you have resources, and sometimes I would get lost in the rabbit trail of those and then come back and finish the chapter. But A Well-Trained Wife, also, it hit the New York Times bestseller list. No surprise to me. It's such a good book, and it's exactly where it belonged. And now you're back with this book, I Belong to Me, A Survivor's Guide to Recovery and Hope After Religious Trauma. That word guide is doing a lot of work. So you were in a different space writing this book. How did you show up differently as you wrote this one?
Yeah, it is very different and it is deeper. Whereas I wrote A Well-Trained Wife with a very compelling narrative because I knew it was a compelling story. And I wanted it to have a lot of high pace and the suspense that I actually lived, because I always had that suspense in there. But when we came up with the idea for I Belong to Me, it was in response to letters that I was getting as I was sharing my work online and as I was sharing my story. And I had to kind of warm up to the idea to self-help because most self-help books are prescriptive and I am not prescriptive. And I did not think I could write a prescriptive book, especially because I'm in opposition to fundamentalist formulas and steps and magic things that you can do in order to have a good outcome. It's like anathema to that. But I was like, if I can write what it feels like to have this experience, if I can walk through the steps that I took through a trailblazing era. So this is really important to the structure of the book. I escaped the violent situation that I did in 2007 into a therapeutic landscape that barely had language for religious trauma at the time. There was not a lot of resources out there. There was not a lot of trauma-informed and religious trauma-informed therapists. And so I was kind of forging new territory right along with the way the field was developing. So it encapsulates this 15-year period that I took to heal, but it's a come alongside you kind of a book where I reflect on the things that I encountered, how I handled it, and that part of it's sort of memoir feeling. But then I also give you lots of information and resources so that you can reflect on your own experience, because I'm not telling you what to do or how you should do it. I'm saying, here's what it's like, here's what it feels like. If these are the feelings that you're experiencing, this part, I did that too, and here's how I combated that. And I get into some subject matter that's just really not really documented very well yet because we are still naming this. And so it's very different in the healing landscape of books and on the shelf of books. I mean, she stands out. She stands out as a lone figure, I'm kind of excited to see how that is received.
Absolutely. She stands out. And she stands out because you've chosen to be more authentic, both as you're healing and to notice the signs of a system that's trying to draw you in being different. And that's something that people coming out of any fundamentalism are prone to fall into again and again. You write about that. But you also write about how your husband was handling you the way your church pastors taught, and that the sin was always yours. Your maybe tone, the tone policing of it all, attitude, those stubborn opinions that women have, outshining him, being somehow a threat, and that's your fault. For listeners who didn't grow up inside this particular kind of system, what does it actually feel like to live in a framework where your personhood itself is the problem?
Yeah, and I think a lot of people who do come from this will relate because different identities and different expressions of your humanity and individuality are also not welcome. One of the things that high control environments do, religious or not, is they seek uniformity. You have to be the same. You have to fit in. So we see this in cultic environments that are not necessarily religious, like sororities or certain cliques and clubs and things. Everybody goes for uniformity, and so you tend to have this churned out result. Well, when you don't fit in, you're constantly in contrast to that, and they other you in order to get you to conform. So I remember so many moments of despair, feeling like I can't even breathe right. Nothing I do is right. I'm just trying to be who Tia is. And actually, I was very far from who Tia actually is, but I was trying to be true to myself and live in ways that I felt were in compliance. I was a good girl. I was trying to do the right thing, and it somehow still was never enough. I could never be small enough, quiet enough, cooperative enough. And eventually, I hit a tipping point with that. It was like, why would God even love me if there's nothing unique about me, And I really had to sit with that and hold that. I don't know how to love a God that isn't interested in me, Tia, because they had spent so much time selling this as a personal one-on-one relationship with Jesus in which my personhood didn't matter. That didn't make any sense to me. So, that process of unpacking and realizing who are they rejecting and who am I really and who am I without it, those questions really sat with me for a really long time. And I took them with me into recovery to kind of try and find out. It's a quest. It's a quest for self-discovery.
Absolutely. And you wrote it so well. I mean, honestly, just
Thank you.
taking us into the depths of your psyche, your soul, like all that. I really felt it. I related to so many parts of it, being raised a good Christian girl myself. And also just the world that expects women to be smaller in work environments of all various types. You have this phrase that you talk about: quiet is good, quiet is safe. It's such a compact piece of indoctrination. And you describe sort of two kinds of silencing: this outright do not speak, and then the shame-based kind where gossip becomes a sin. So you never name what's being done to you. So how does a child internalize that narrative, and what does it cost them as an adult?
That's a great question. I internalized this really early because I was a talkative, language-based kid. No one taught me to read. I was reading as a toddler. I was reading and thinking and asking and, so curious. And I've picked up really fast, overtly and covertly, that adults preferred it when I was quiet, silent, obedient. There's, of course, all the overt messaging about children should be seen and not heard. My parents gave me a lot of freedom and leeway, but I also knew quickly how to conform and almost be a chameleon in environments that expected that silence. When I internalized that, it became this message of self-policing, wanting to be good, wanting to not say the wrong thing or hurt anybody. And so it's almost like an autocorrect that takes over in your brain. We all have this problem with our phones where like the words come out and we didn't mean to type that. I didn't mean to think that sometimes, but it was just so automatic in my brain of, you can't say that. You're going to hurt somebody if you say that. You're going to upset the apple cart if you say that. You're going to get in trouble. And I didn't want to be in trouble, And so that just confounded in my life as my control, increased. But it was deeply embedded inside of me so that even when I left the high control environment, I still had a lot of unpacking to do when it came to finding my voice, using my voice, not being afraid to speak up, learning how to name my experiences. The book has a lot of etymology in it for that reason, because vocabulary became so important to recovery. You can't heal from what you can't name. And so spending time in the naming was really important.
Yeah, I really caught that. And you named some things for me that I hadn't named before or had language for. And then reminded me of some of the things that have come out that have helped me therapeutically over the years of, coming out of some evangelicalism as well. You also write that no is a child's first stab at autonomy. And in the Christianity you came from, and I came from a similar one, at least the Southern Baptist part, children were often punished for saying no until they learned to say yes to everything from authority figures, which, if you understand anything about abuse in evangelicalism or just the Southern Baptists at all, we know that's very dangerous. But you said, I was one of them. And so what does relearning no actually look like for someone who had it conditioned out of them?
I had such a relearning to do when it came to this word. And I hear this reflected in especially Christian environments where women are like learning to say no. And you're not being mean when you say no. And no is a complete sentence. And the courage to say no. Sometimes it's reflexive. Like we can become so conditioned that even when someone hurts us, we suppress any sound of pain because we don't want to, I don't know, draw attention to ourselves, or, there's a lot of motivations that can go into that. But healing looked like being able to blurt that out as like a child again, like very basic one-word sentences. Ouch, no, don't do that. I don't want to go there. This was some of my early, like, just get in touch with the feeling you're having, even if you don't stay there, or if you find more graduated language, to describe it. No is essentially one word, one powerful consent-loaded word. And you find out a lot of information in this, like Who has a problem if you say no? How are they reacting when they say no? Are they respecting your autonomy and your ability to say no? Like those are the immediate questions that come up for me when I think about it now, because my no is respected, and I've had to work on the secondary fallouts of like, and you don't have to over-explain, and you don't have to word vomit, and you don't owe an explanation, of like excuses. I have to have a right reason to say no to something. No, it can just be not right for me right now, and no harm, no foul. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like in a lot of spaces with women, especially those who are raised in Christian patriarchy, feeling like you have to give a context for saying no to people. You're supposed to get the extreme versions of it, be always available to everybody, be giving the emotional
Mm-hmm.
labor to your husband, your kids, your in-laws, everybody at church and school, and the neighbors. And there's really not a lot of space for the women to figure out themselves. And as a good little Christian girl raised with perfectionism, that hurts, long term. It's hard to come out of. You can't just snap out of it. And so you really walked us through your process with that, which is really beautiful. And you say you learned, which I also learned, suffer well and you'll be rewarded. And also you talk about how you say my religion taught us to endure suffering, not seek solutions for it. And then you say, isn't that awfully convenient, this whole notion, if actually they are the ones causing the pain? And when I read that really hit me hard, because I want to know from you, like, how did you arrive at being able to see that so clearly when you were once fully inside that indoctrination?
This really came down to getting pretty good at fruit, knowing them by their fruit and knowing them by the outcomes. So this glorification of suffering is embedded in Christianity. You're supposed to align with Christ. And so being able to suffer the way he did with willingness and acceptance and even serenity was always the standard, instead of what can I do to eliminate it? What can I do to relieve it? How can I, it's like teach a man to fish or give a man a fish, difference. Like, what can I do to actually solve the problem, the systemic problem that's here? Was not really welcome. It was barely addressed. And what I realized was the system, the practices that we were under for that suffering that just continued to condone it. Number one, it benefited someone. And that was just very easy. They didn't have to change anything. They didn't have to feel confronted. But it also wasn't sustainable. And it meant I was going to ultimately die to this and die for this. And when it became a matter of survival, that really put all the ideology under the microscope. Was I willing to die for this? No. There are too many different versions of what they were teaching to even know that we had the right corner at that point. And I wasn't willing to sacrifice my children for it either. And so when you make a step like that and you draw a line and then it costs you everything, and there's no do-overs and there's no going back, you find out like, okay, well, I turned over the wrong rock, like now we're out here. Now we have to contend with it. And it was a revelation to me to realize that I could value my resources. I could value my sustaining ability, my energies, and I was actually healthier and had more to give. Or the irony, I had more to serve and more to give because my cup was full and I was replenished and healthy. I was a better mom. I was a better person, a better partner. And that changed everything I thought about suffering. It's like, okay, we live in a time with so much civilization and technology and research and science and all of this. A lot of our suffering is optional. And being able to say we don't have to do it that way, we have a better way, is like now my biggest rush. I love that. When we can solve problems and actually move on to the next step, it's great.
I love that. And I love that you finally saw the light and did the brave thing for yourself and your kids. It's something, is a gift that keeps on giving to you and all of us that get to learn from your story and what you're learning from. I also was raised with this phrase, die to self, but somehow when I read it in your book, like I had to put it down for a bit because it just brought back all kinds of things that phrase did to me. And even though I come out of some of it, I realized, wow, it was a bit of almost like a trigger that helped me go back and revisit all of the ways that had been said to me and modeled. And I'm wondering, how it affected your view of yourself to hear die to self so much. And then what does it mean to reclaim a self that was systemically taught to disappear, including that joy acronym, which I was raised with too, and as a young child, the Jesus first, others second, and yourself last, which, as you point out, meant if you're last, it was, pretty much never your turn. How did that affect your view of yourself?
Yeah. So, you've probably heard people say things like abuse victims that stay in abuse and they won't leave. They just have really poor self-esteem. They have really poor self-worth, which always has felt very victim blaming to me. That is such a secondary whip after the things that stole your self-worth. When you're taught that it's actually glorifying to God that you have no self, you have nothing to fight for. You have nothing unique to offer. You have nothing that's like redemptive or explains like why you're here. Why are you this child's mother? Why are you in this place of leadership? It could be anybody because you're just an interchangeable cog at that point. And that die to self, like I had already made so many like sacrifices after sacrifices to mold and conform myself. And I spent a lot of time in A Well-Trained Wife showing how my world narrowed and how I had to streamline my priorities in order to fit into this vertical power structure with a man for complementarianism. And that meant losing my selfhood and then turning to my faith and saying, but see, it feels good. This is good for God. And I was gaslighting myself that I was doing the right and beneficial thing by just completely annihilating anything that made Tia Tia. And then I didn't have anything unique to give. So rediscovering that and unpacking that, it was a lot of baby steps because I didn't know how I'd be received. I'm a little quirky. I'm weird. I'm neurospicy. I have a different take on the world. I blurt out and say things. I'm a little audacious. I'm very, very expressive. I'm high capacity. I'm not for everyone, And so when I'm with that self now, like, well, she's not for everyone, which means we might face some rejection out there. That used to devastate me. Now it's just like I can see, well, there's a place for me and there's a place not for me, and that's okay.
I love it. It's such a healthy place you've come to. Um, and there's no shortage of places in the world that want to make women small. You've made a lot of
Yeah.
those connections between what we're seeing in the US with Christian nationalism based on what you've lived through. And we're seeing it in corporate America. I'm here in Silicon Valley. There's like no shortage of capitulation of Silicon Valley bros with the White House that seem to be as,
Yeah.
Velcroed as possible at this point. And some of those, Doug Wilson elements you've mentioned, and a world that people thought was more fringe that has now really become a global phenomenon with the
Right.
manosphere, everything. So as you describe some of that, how do you speak to what you see that is going on, these connections between those elements and what people should pay attention to?
I am really good at looking at patterns and noticing the subtle tells that there's something underneath the cell, underneath the shiny facade that they want us to see. I also really love to just look at outcomes. So if there's a survivor from a movement, I want to hear about it more than I want to hear the salesman who's trying to sell the movement. It's like, okay, well, I hear your sales pitch. Now let me have my consumer reviews. And we have our consumer reviews for faith, for systems, for Tradwife, for this style of government. We have outcomes for all of this stuff. We know what it's like to live like a Puritan and give up all our vaccines and give up all of our, science and research and progress and things that have brought us to this point. I don't want to go back there to this, backwards place because we left there in the first place, for a reason. So I pair that. I just have a knack, I think, an innate ability to see how the 2 points connect. And my growth has been in, okay, well, say that. Instead of being worried that someone's going to think you sound stupid or you don't know what you're talking about or you have imposter syndrome or whatever, just say the thing that you see. And when I have done that, when I just share from my own vantage point and my experience, a lot of people come around and say, me too. Thank you for saying it that way. Never heard it put in that kind of terms. And it never fails. Most of the time it is well, I thought that was obvious, is my take, but it's not obvious. And that's why it helps when I can say it clearly. So it's been kind of a marvel to realize, oh, you just kind of you forged a career here doing the thing that I've been doing since I was a little kid. Like, I see through you. Just that. Yeah.
Yeah. And isn't that I mean, that's often the advantage of you described yourself as neurospicy, that pattern recognition. A lot of people are just kind of neurotypical and going along and going with the flow.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
the goal is to belong and fit in and assimilate. Um, but your ability to see it from a fringe point of view is actually really helpful and needed,
Mm.
especially at times where it feels like we're being gaslit on a grand scale with the indoctrination from the religious piece and the political piece, and certainly the marriage of the two. When you turned to the church for help because of violence, you were handed teachers that really deepened that power imbalance rather than address the danger. I mean, you talk about when he
Mhm.
said, she said happens, they usually go with he said. And that's often been what I've noticed as well and my own lived experience. How do you want people outside these communities to understand about why leaving isn't just as simple as leaving?
Oh, yeah. I recently said something a little bit controversial because I said the only safe mother in patriarchy is the mother who takes her kids and leaves. And one of the pushbacks was, well, it's not that easy. And I was like, oh, yeah, I know. I know it's not that easy. It is a both and. Leaving encapsulates a process. That is and usually a multi-years long process. I didn't leave a violent man, with just easy. Like, I had a 10-year divorce. We had multiple forensic investigations. We had diagnoses and custody issues and a lot of child support problems. So there was a lot of, fallout right up until the baby turned 18. That is how that goes. But still, I was progressively on my way out in a way. And I think that matters into the psychological health and growth that people see in me today. Because I said no, and I put a boundary on what was happening there. And then, so that's where my heart is helping people identify where those places are and begin the process of healing. Like, I also talk about how deconstruction is not, there's no end point. It should lead to decolonization. It should lead to systems dismantling. It should lead to a lifetime of curiosity over what are my blind spots? What am I not seeing? What am I like just in a new habit with, or where am I stuck and paralyzed? That's the value of an ongoing healing and leaving and deconstructing.
I love that perspective. And I definitely, your heart comes through for people who are in situations still stuck, similar to what you were. And certainly the proof in the pudding that you know what it is like from your own lived experience. And so then you
Yeah.
have sort of the chops to be able to speak to this in ways other people don't. And I think that so many in the survivor community, whatever your survivorship is about,
Mhm.
really want to help those who are left behind. I mean, whistleblowers whistleblow for a reason. I mean, I'm here in California and I just got my um, we have this booklet that comes out before we do elections, and I'm so glad that all the survivors spoke out against the candidate for governor who's in Congress, who stepped down within 48 hours of survivors coming out at great personal risk to their career and reputation and all the things. But they did it because they just couldn't have on their conscience this man, you know,
Mhm.
leading the whole state of California and continuing to grow in his political career at the expense of all the women who would be assaulted. So there's such a strength in the survivor community, the whistleblowers who come out and write like you do, tell their stories. And you write about recovery. I love this phrase that you talk about as cradling yourself more. It's such a good image, both because your motherhood is such a key aspect of the reason you left, but also realizing that you deserve some of that cradling as well. And just the visceral nature of the somatic visual of that, allowing for a transition period, the way the ocean connects to dry land through a series of swamps is how you describe it. The ocean has been certainly the biggest healer for me. And you're clear about the danger of skipping that transition, that it's not a fair decision field. And we'd never expect intelligent decision making, as you described, from somebody who just walked away from a car crash. I loved that illustration. So, what do you wish therapists, friends, and family members understood about this transitional phase and the very real risk of re injury when somebody moves on too quickly?
Yeah, I love this question. I think we really do need to spend more time identifying psychological shock, which we all experience every day. I mean, think of how many times you've been shocked by a headline, afraid of nuclear war, afraid of, whatever is happening. Those are shocks to our system. They affect us on a nervous system level. They impact our bodies, our decision making, our clarity, our brain fog, all of these things. I don't think we talk about it enough. And I've had a lot of therapy, and very little of it has talked about ongoing shock. We talk about triggers and, different bad things in our past, but there's right now in Americans' culture for the past 10 years, we've been living steeped in a traumatic soup that has impacted us. And there's going to be an aftermath. I feel this great change coming. We have a great reckoning coming. There's going to be some shifts in who's in leadership, some shifts in what all of this has led to and what it has stirred up, what kinds of things we've been confronted with. We're not really equipped as a society right now to deal with any of this because we're all feeling exhausted and broken and traumatized and clouded and in shock. So suddenly I feel like my book is really applicable to just about everybody because we're all living through religious trauma. But the aftermath period and respecting it is what happens when you're starting to, the shock has happened. You've gone through this immediate, high alarm survival skills. And now you're coming down and back into stasis. And if you're in complex trauma, you never really make it to stasis because the next trauma comes and you just stay in that survival mode for long term. We've been there, we all can relate to this. But when you're allowed to come all the way down in aftermath, that's also the site of your regeneration. That is where all your healing takes place. You are raw, you are open, you are vulnerable. And the reason why it needs so much protecting is because if you make big decisions in the aftermath, they're probably not going to be wise ones. They're going to be self-protective. They're going to be fear-based, easily led by others. You're not going to be able to hear yourself think. And that's not fair. Your brain and your system are still trying to recalibrate from what you just went through. This has changed everything for the way that I deal with shocks and stuff now. To be able to metabolize it in real time means that I don't store the trauma. I deal with it and I have less, things in the tomorrow to deal with that came from today. But I didn't know it back then. And you can spend years in aftermath, years in shock, years in survival mode. And so that's why it's such a change now because I never let it get that far. And what I really hope to get people thinking about is their own aftermaths. If you've been through a horrible shock today, you probably need to take a couple days, and do something differently. Or if I talk to somebody who's just done EMDR and they're completely wiped out and drained from their therapy session, drink a lot of water, take a walk, and take tomorrow easy. You're going to feel like shit. You're going to be exhausted, the next day. So knowing that and planning for it and building in recovery time, just like you would for a workout, just like you would for a surgery, can be really psychologically impacting in the decisions that you make later and your ability to thoughtfully respond to something instead of a knee-jerk reaction.
Such good advice. And something that's not largely talked about or known or even experienced, as you said, in therapeutic settings. And so often what I've seen, especially I guess if we just take the religious trauma piece of what you're writing about, is somebody who has a religious traumatic experience in a particular church and they immediately find a new church. So you talk about the pull to cult hop, thinking, as you say, it would be better this time and this place. And, connecting it to how evangelicalism trained you to fawn, making you vulnerable to the same character dynamic in a new setting where you just sort of fall in line and, start to experience fawning as a traumatic response. How did you learn to recognize that particular pattern and how does it shape the way you stay wary of gurus or anyone who has a system full of answers for people trying to escape chaos?
Yeah, it's by kind of forcing myself to take the time out. If have had any kind of emotional upset around anything, I have to give myself time to feel, hear, name, identify how that made me feel. What did it stir up in my past? This is really helpful with interpersonal dynamics and when you start to feel manipulated or pulled on by someone else, why you feel like you need another group. If you are hurt in one group, do you hop to another group because you just can't imagine being on your own? This is why the book is called I Belong to Me, because healing that sense of contentment and sovereignty within myself made me less dependent on groups that require my belief in order to belong. I belong to me, so I don't need a group to feel belonging. And the church, out here in the abstract, has hung that over people for years, that you need them for safety. It's really based on this primal, we got to have a community in order to not get eaten by the saber-toothed tiger. But we don't live there anymore. This is this modern civilized society, and you don't need groups for belonging. You need belonging inside of yourself so that you can then go be part of a group in health. You have something to offer them. You have something to serve in community. You're not losing your identity within them, So it's not like an anti-community stance. It's more of a less codependent stance. You're interdependent and you're a strong person in your selfhood. I have said before, it kind of predator proofs you, but for me, that's what it's done. It's made me less vulnerable to manipulation, to persuasion, to people who are trying to sell me the latest snake oil, and definitely gurus. Anytime I see somebody who's centering themselves as the next, messiah of whatever category they're in, I'm like, no, I don't need you. I mean, I save so much money this way because I don't need it. It's not going to fill any need that I can't fill for myself. That's not what I'm looking for anymore. It also keeps me off the bad actors, because we can see like the bad actors who they are selling something and then they get caught doing stuff, later that's a scandal. Like, dodged that one again. It's great.
Yeah, for real. It's a part of the evangelical way for so long throughout the history in the United States in particular. And then it's also in politics, it's in corporate America, it's how capitalism works, is social media, all the things. And so
Yeah.
what a gift to yourself that you've been able to find that space and have the boundaries and the filter you need to know how to be discerning after growing up in a world that taught you the opposite, just to fawn, which I can relate to. You write, I rediscovered a sense of self because when I left, I had no self, no idea who I was or I could be, and the unspecified casualty of a system and someone else's story. And you talk about how our worth was found. We did not find our worth. So a very passive verb that was intentional. How do you begin to build an identity when the system that formed you was built to erase it and expected you to be found? I read that as a probably for women kind of continuing this damsel in distress narrative, which makes us vulnerable to predatory men in particular. And then I'd also want to know, when did you first know and truly know that you belong to yourself?
Yeah. Oh, I love that because it's such a happy memory. So I'll start at the beginning part. My mind just went a little blank, but it'll come back. Help me out.
Yeah. So how did you first truly know that you belong to yourself?
Oh, that was the second part. That's why. Okay, I'm gonna have to start there. So,
And then I'll give you the other question. That's fine.
yeah, the damsel in distress narrative is so tied to our need for an external savior. And the external, like prince will come get you, and all you have to do is sit and be pretty, sit and wait. Sleep if you have to, Cinderella and Sleeping Beauty and, Snow White. And you just sing and talk to the birds and be sweet and all that. And someday your prince will come. And if you've been waiting on a prince and it's life or death and it doesn't come and you have to get up and save yourself like I did, I don't want to replicate that in my life again. So, this has been very driven by need of, I don't want that to happen to me again. And I made some mistakes in the aftermath of that leaving because I didn't have language or understanding. Especially the first 4 or 5 years, I didn't have a real good idea of what had happened, didn't know how to name it. And so I passively fell back into other situations where others were all too happy to take control or tell me what to do or lead, and I didn't have any muscle to push against that. So when I did finally start, at least I can get out of those situations a little faster now, that was there's a skill set here. I can learn to recognize the red flags and the green flags. I can learn to set boundaries and say no. It was very much a baby step process of, what a child does as they develop, because I didn't have development, I had indoctrination, and that directly interferes with each other. If they're indoctrinating you for a uniform result, you're not developing into the person that you uniquely are. And as I was a mom and my kids were going through these developmental phases, I was realizing, I never had that, differentiation in adolescence, or the ability to try on different identities, or rebel against your parents, naturally. You're supposed to. This is part of adolescence, but my religious tradition wiped out adolescence. We went from childhood to now you're in puberty, now you're sexually ready, and we just have to wait and abide by the law until you're old enough to be of age. And so at 33, I had the mind and the maturity of probably someone in their late 20s or late teens. And I had to go back and redevelop, as as a child,
Yeah.
which I was encouraged to know is possible, that our brains are plastic and flexible enough to really stretch and grow, and you can expand. I'll never get that time back. I'll never get those years back, but I can um, become who I was supposed to be. I can become who I really am. I can um, redevelop skills that help me be an autonomous adult going forward. So it really came down to, as far as when I knew that I belonged to myself. At the end of my second marriage, he put an ultimatum towards me. He didn't want to be married to a writer anymore. He did not like my work in this space. And he put it to me, me or writing, basically. And I had just sold the book, and I was like, I'm not giving up. Like, I just hit success. There's no way. And that motion, that knowing to my marrow, there's no way I'm giving myself up for this idea. And if he really wanted the real me, he would not have presented such a question, because he
Right.
knows how much this is my life's blood and how much I need to tell this story. I need to do this work. How much more fulfilled I am when I have this sense of purpose and can take this really hard, awful thing that happened to me and make something beautiful with it. All of that was caught up in that moment. And my daughter, I had a conversation with my daughter, and she's like, "Choose you, Mom. You never have been able to just choose you." And I did. And then I took myself to Europe to walk it out for 9 months.
I love
It was
that.
great. Solo travel will help you belong to yourself
100%.
quite well. Yeah.
Yes. I love that. And I love that it was your daughter that spoke those words. Sometimes I've seen so many moms need the permission from their daughters almost to do the thing
Yeah.
they know to do, which is to, prioritize yourself, because it tells your daughters what that means, and your sons and everybody
Mhm.
around you. But at least I was often raised to put myself last too, especially as a mother. And
Yeah.
I don't think is unique to fundamentalism and Christianity, but I think we get that a lot in society, expecting mothers to do, in the US in particular, the unpaid labor without any paid childcare. We're seeing a lot of return to office in corporations that seem to be connected to the trad wife preference of how things should go, and that the office is really for men, and make America great again, when the offices were men that didn't have to go home and help their children get to bed at night. And so making
Wow.
it all the systems, as you mentioned, when you start to deconstruct, you start to notice the systems that were built a long time ago by
Mhm.
people who never even wrote women into the Constitution to this day. So the
Right.
systems weren't for us. They're not supporting us. As we finish up here, I would love to hear, is there anything you're thinking about as you're releasing this book into the world, kind of your hopes for it, the person that reads it, a message to them as they get ready to read it?
Yeah, I hope that it meets people where they are. I know we come to this work from all different places, and I wanted to write it in a way where you could pick it up anywhere you are and fall into it. Feel supported throughout the entire journey. Understand that there's a scope and sequence to healing. That you don't just It's not overnight. There is a process. You will grow the skills and the ability to, the same way the human body does as we grow. The day you tie your shoes is not what it looks like when you're 18. Like it's the first time, it's a fumble, and that's okay. And to have that acceptance and knowledge that hope is there, that it's possible to heal. When I started, the thinking was kind of like, once you were broken, you were always broken, and you just always be scarred. And I didn't accept that for myself. And I hope that to give that to people. I also hope that they approach it with some nuance, because I talk about some subjects here, especially in the back half of the book, that you have to be able to hold plural truths and nuance in order to approach them. And that's why they're at the back of the book. So like, if you turn to the back and you're like, okay, I'm going to do something that somebody who's done this for 15 years can do. It's the equivalent, like watching a YouTube and thinking, okay, now I can climb mountains because I watched some video on mountain climbing. It's not the same thing. You have to you have to build and accumulate these steps. So I hope that that's an experience for readers. I hope it's a book they come back to, and it's not just a single read.
Yes, I already know it's going to be for me. And when I think about that moment where you had to choose belonging to yourself and your writing, and that you knew this was something you had to do, I just want to say, yes, I believe that. What
Yeah.
you were put on this earth to write and help people see the patterns from your own experience. And I'm so glad that in choosing yourself, you actually chose this for us too. So it's very bold. Um, and I know that as people read it, they're going to, just like I did, find themselves in your story and find the handles to move forward, whatever part of it they're in. So thank you for this conversation today. How can people find you and order your book?
Yeah. Oh, please pre-order. It comes out May 5th, so I don't know when this is airing, but
Yeah.
pre-orders
soon.
is May 5th. If you make the pre-order window, go ahead and get the thank you gifts at tialevings.com/gifts, because I have like some little treats for you. And to find me, I'm at Tia Levings Writer everywhere. So that's super easy.
Yes. Well, thank you
Yeah.
so much for this. I will have you be with our difference makers in a bit, where we're going to talk about that Venn diagram of women raised in evangelicalism and burnout from holding all the things. So looking forward to that. But thank you so much for the gift of this book. Everybody go pre-order I Belong to Me. You will not regret it. Buy several for your friends, everybody you know that can benefit, which is a lot of us apparently in religious trauma at this point.
Yes.
Thanks, Tia.
At this point, yes.
Yes. Thank you so much for
Thank
being on the
you.
show.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tia. Genuinely, this conversation is the kind that people are going to return to, and I know it. I Belong to Me is available for pre-order now. Please go pre-order it and get Tia's gifts. And order several copies for the people in your life that you know are going to need this guide and return to it again and again. Find Tia everywhere at Tia Levings Writer, and I'll put all her links in the show notes. If this episode moved you, please share it with someone who needs it. I know there's people in your life that you know are either stuck, they've been through something similar, they are in a situation where they may see parts of it, but they don't see all of it, and they need the perspective that she writes so deeply about in such a visceral way from her own lived experience, her deep thinking, her research, her knowledge. She's brilliant and has the lived experience to create and write a book that is exactly what so many of us need to read right now. So if this episode moved you, please share it with someone and the many who need to hear it. Leave a review at aworldofdifferencepodcast.com/reviews/new or wherever you listen to your podcast. It only takes a couple minutes and it really helps the show reach the people that it's meant for. People who need to hear this episode and all the different ones that might connect with them in ways that they're leading both themselves, the people around them, and finding a way through that personal development, self-discovery piece that's so hard to increase our self-awareness as we lead in the different ways we lead across industries and across the world. And if you want to go deeper, including the part of this conversation we held back just for you, join our Difference Makers community at patreon.com/aworldofdifference, where I ask her about the Venn diagram of women in these evangelical cultures where putting themselves last in the JOY acronym, Jesus first, others second, yourself last, or just being very self-sacrificing and normalizing suffering and not getting out of it, really being last on the totem pole, and also burnout, and how she describes it as a perfect circle. And whether you have lived in a fundamentalist environment or are working in a capitalist corporate structure that is designed to burn you out and move on to the next one, or whatever that looks like for you. Maybe it's a government system that is not designed for people who ever need to take care of themselves in any way and expected to live and work long hours in Washington, D.C. or anywhere around the world, UN, disaster relief efforts, any of it. That Venn diagram and the way we describe that in our Difference Maker community together is really impactful. She has a lot of great insight about it. So join our Difference Makers community at patreon.com/aworldofdifference. And until next time, keep making a difference. Recognize that you belong to you, and the world needs exactly who you are, with all that belonging to yourself. Okay, difference makers, I know you, and I know when you hear something you really enjoyed and you learned from it, you want to share it. I am like that too, which is why I love to promote guests on this podcast for you to get to hear them yourself. Sometimes they write books, sometimes they write on Substack, sometimes they podcast, sometimes their voice is just every day in the workplace where they live and impact their communities in a variety of ways with all the hats that they wear. So if you enjoyed this episode, and I hope that you did, please share it with a friend, a parent, a neighbor, somebody you went to boarding school with back in the day, somebody at work, your boss, people on your team, because this is a message they needed to hear. And it have impacted you. Please give us a 5-star rating and give us a review. It really helps our reach for more people like you to find us, the difference makers, the listeners, the leaders, the people in your communities that are making the world a better place. I appreciate you so much.